Unbroken, Chapter 2, pages 15 through 17. Pete had big plans for Louis. A senior in the 1931-32 school year, he would graduate with 10 varsity letters, including 3 in basketball and 3 in baseball. But it was track, in which he earned 4 varsity letters, tied the school half-mile record, and set its mile record of 5 minutes and 6 seconds. That was his true forte. Looking at Louis, whose getaway speed was a saving grace, Pete thought he saw the same incipient talent. As it turned out, it wasn't Pete who got Louis into the track for the first time. It was Louis's weakness for girls. In February, the 9th grade girls began assembling a team for an inter-class track meet, and in a class with only 4 boys, Louis was the only male who looked like he could run. The girls worked their charms, and Louis found himself standing on the track, barefoot, for a 660-yard race. When everyone else ran, he followed, churning along with jimmying elbows and dropping far behind. As he labored home last, he heard laughing. Gasping and humiliated, he ran straight off the track and hid under the bleachers. The coach muttered something about how that kid belonged anywhere but the track. "He's my brother," Pete replied. From that day on, Pete was all over Louis, forcing him to train, then dragging him to the track to run in his second meet. Urged on by the kids in the stands, Louis put in just enough effort to beat one boy and finish third. He hated running, but the applause was intoxicating, and the prospect of more was just enough incentive to keep him marginally compliant. Pete herded him out to train every day and rode his bicycle behind him, whacking him with a stick. Louis dragged his feet, belly ached, and quit at the first sign of fatigue. Pete made him get up and keep going. Louis started winning. At the season's end, he became the first Torrance kid to make the All-City Finals. He finished 5th. Pete had been right about Louis's talent, but to Louis, training felt like just one more constraint or restraint. At night, he listened to the whistles of the passing trains, and one day in the summer of 1932, he couldn't bear it any longer. It began over a chore that Louis's father asked him to do. Louis resisted, a fight ensued, and Louis threw some clothes into a bag and stormed toward the front door. His parents ordered him to stay. Louis was beyond persuasion. As he walked out, his mother rushed to the kitchen and emerged with a sandwich wrapped in waxed paper. Louis stuffed it in his bag and left. He was partway down the front walk when he heard his name called. When he turned, there was his father, grim-faced, holding $2 in his outstretched hand. It was a lot of money for a man whose paycheck didn't bridge the week. Louis took it and walked away. He rounded up a friend, and together they hitchhiked to Los Angeles, broke into a car and slept in the seats. The next day they jumped a train, climbed on the roof, and rode north. The trip was a nightmare. The boys got locked in a boxcar so hot that they were soon frantic to escape. Louis found a discarded strip of metal, climbed onto his friend's shoulders, pried a vent open, squirmed out and helped his friend out, badly cutting himself in the process. Then they were discovered by the railroad detective, who forced them to jump from the moving train at gunpoint. After several days of walking, getting chased out of orchards and grocery stores where they tried to steal food, they wound up sitting on the ground in a rail yard, filthy, bruised, sunburned, and wet, sharing a stolen can of beans. A train rattled past. Louis looked up. "I saw beautiful white tablecloths and crystal on the tables, and food. People laughing and enjoying themselves and eating," he said later, "and I was sitting here shivering, eating a miserable can of beans." He remembered the money in his father's hand and the fear in his mother's eyes as she offered him a sandwich. He stood up and headed home. When Louis walked into his house, Louise threw her arms around him, inspected him for injuries, led him to the kitchen, and gave him a cookie. Anthony came home, saw Louis, sank into his chair, his face soft with relief. After dinner, Louis went upstairs, dropped into bed, and whispered his surrender to Pete. In the summer of 1932, Louis did almost nothing but run. On the invitation of a friend, he went to stay at a cabin on the Kahlua Indian Reservation in Southern California's high desert. Each morning, he rose with the sun, picked up his rifle, and jogged into the sagebrush. He ran up and down hills, over the desert, through the gullies. He chased bands of horses, darting into the swirling herds and trying in vain to snatch a fistful of mane and swing aboard. He swam in a sulphur spring, watched over by the Kahlua women scrubbing clothes on the rocks, and stretched out to dry himself in the sun. On his run back to the cabin each afternoon, he shot a rabbit for supper. Each evening, he climbed atop a cabin and lay back, reading Zane Grey novels. When the sun sank and the words faded, he gazed over the landscape, moved by its beauty, watching it slip from gray to purple before darkness blended land and sky. In the morning, he rose to run again. He didn't run from something or to something, not for anyone or in spite of anyone. He ran because it was what his body wished to do. The resistiveness, the self-consciousness, and the need to oppose disappeared. All he felt was peace. He came home with a mania or obsession for running. All the effort that he'd once put into thieving or theft, he threw into track. On Pete's instruction, he ran his entire paper route for the Torrance Herald, to and from school, and to the beach and back. He rarely stayed on the sidewalk, veering onto the neighbors' lawns to hurdle bushes. He gave up drinking and smoking. To expand his lung capacity, he ran to the public pool at the Redondo Beach, dove to the bottom, grabbed the drain plug, and floated there, hanging on a little longer each time. Eventually, he could stay underwater for 3 minutes and 45 seconds. People kept jumping in to save him.